Coming up on episode 80 of the Upful Life podcast.
I have to say one thing. Brad just came out here and whispered that to me that I'm supposed to convey that if anybody is driving up to Coventry, that there's some rain happening up there right now, and it's what they're finding is that the parking is moving in slowly. So they're saying that they're encouraging people to maybe like go up Saturday morning. Nothing's really happening Friday night anyway, but just to back up and let the traffic play itself out. So I've been told to tell you that, and now I've told you. And thank you. Thank you very much. Goodbye, you guys. Thanks.
And we're glad that you're alive.
I have some really bad news that I have to report that I feel really badly about, and that's that because of how crazy the rain's been over the last few days and over the last few weeks building up, everything here is flooded and we can't get in all the cars, and we have to start turning people away.
We just feel horrible about it. We've been sitting there for hours trying to figure out what we can do, and there's no options, that we have to turn people away.
And we're glad that you're alive.
To go through all this stuff, and as the four of us went through a lot of, difficult times at certain times, as everybody does, and to always have those three people there with you at any of those given times. Excuse me.
Yes, indeedy. Welcome to the Upful Life podcast. I'm your host, B. Getz, and this is episode number 80, coming to you live and direct from the Vibe Junkie Studios in Oakland, California. Episode 80, 20 years later, we going in the wayback machine, and so grateful you are tuning in. Shout out to our friends at Fete du Void down there in Oakdale, Louisiana. October 3rd through 6th, what started as a house party put on by the Iceman Special 8 years ago on a little farmland in Iowa, Louisiana, is now a full-on 3-day music, art, healing, camping festival. Fete du Void. This little unknown grassroots festival is much more than you expect for a small 500-person event, boasting over 50 musical acts from Zydeco to hip-hop, rock and roll to dubstep, and everything in between, headlined and facilitated by the Iceman Special and their loyal community. It is indeed a true showcase of Louisiana music and culture and beyond. Set on a sacred land with 3 full stages, plus an electronic stage, 10,000 square foot warehouse with roller skating rink, a Zenden, a Zenzebo, many more surprises that you will only find when you enter the Void, V-O-I-D, a vision of infinite dimensions. October 3 through 6 in Oakdale, Louisiana. Tickets are on sale now at feteduvoid.com. That's FETEDUVOID.com. FETEDUVOID.com. Let's talk about this lineup. Fantastic lineup. Headlined by the Iceman Special 3 times. Swamp Dogg, Maggie Kerner, Flag Boy G's, Benny Bloom and the Late Bloomers. Shout out Benny from Lettuce. We also got the Coombs Brothers, Jesus Coombs and Tycoon, plus Ryan Zoidis from Lettuce. That's going to be dope. We got the MC, La Reezy, Trap Jazz, Two Bob Crew. Shout out to my man Luke Caranta, The Quickening, and my man Blake Quick. Of course, Sari Jordan, Fam as Fuck, so many others. Check it out. We got Zoomst. Love Zoomst. Shout out to Jake. And feteduvoid.com. All the information's there. Shout out to my man Donnie. We'll have somebody from the fest on the show in the future to talk more about Fete du Void, October 3rd through 6th. Yes, indeedy.
Looking at me, you wanna see black, then jump on it. And to the chumps who think they might want it, I might spot you ride and dump on it. I'll send a couple of balls to that corner of yours and roll out with a nigga slumped on it. You see black fall back, son, being shot up in a black Regal, no insurance. We like DEA serving warrants, so tell the freaks you know to stop pouring. We gon' grab the mics and get them off the wall so everybody in here can stop snoring. You with a safe money, unlock it, pull it out your pocket. Ben Banneker Bay with the Alamo rockin'. Black order, all capitals like the sovereign. Girls, get your eyes back up out the socket. Focus, flawless, New York and Europe. To land on my feet, ain't even touch the soil yet.
Yes, indeedy. Welcome back to the Up for Life podcast. I'm your host, B. Getz. So grateful for everybody tuning in. This is a special episode, a unique episode, one that is 20 years in the making, if you will. But before we get into the matters at hand, I want to let y'all know, rating and reviewing the Up for Life podcast goes a whole long way for steering those algorithms in this direction and letting folks know what's going on around here. So if you have the time and are so inclined, please rate or review the Up for Life podcast, preferably on Apple Podcasts, because that makes the most impact. But really, any review, any rating on any service is huge. And I am so appreciative if you do take the time to do that. You can also reach me directly with any kind of suggestions, any kind of reflections, constructive criticisms, if you want to hook me up with a possible guest, or you just want to tell me what you loved about the show. I love to hear from the people. Send me an email at b.getz@upfullife.com, b.getz@upfullife.com. Another way you can really help things out is by smashing that subscribe button, because more people following along, the more people get the word. And if you're picking up what I'm putting down and you want to send me a couple of dollars for making you holla, I appreciate anybody who supports any of the work I do. So if you want, please, the top of the upfullife.com website, you'll see a support button in huge letters. You just click on that. It goes to a Venmo link. If you want to skip all that, Venmo.com/Brian-Getz-0, Brian-Getz-0. And if you want to send funds in another way besides Venmo, just send me an email, b.getz@upfullife.com, and I'm sure we can figure something out. But it is a passion project to put out this podcast free of charge. So please enjoy episode 80 of the Upful Life podcast. Coming right up. Yes, indeedy.
Spit thought name, I'm a bomb your local neighborness for a 10-mile radius. Well, every ghetto craving this new anthem. My brain unstable and I'm just too handsome. I bang with the best around.
Down, 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 down. Open
episode 80 of the Upful Life podcast. We are doing an oral history of Phish Coventry for the 20th anniversary this week. I know I don't do a ton of Phish content, but I do try to mix it in when I can, and this felt appropriate and almost written, like it was supposed to happen. So I wanted to basically whip something together in short order that checks a lot of boxes and covers a lot of bases, but does not really analyze or unpack the concert performances. That's been done ad nauseum by the Phish community for 20 years. It's a very painful and traumatic whole experience, really, but certainly the performances by the band. Some of my listeners do not have their thumb on the pulse of the Phish from Vermont and everything that comes with it and the fog that surrounds. So you may not know, but this was going to be Phish's retirement. They announced a few months earlier that their annual festival that they have in different locations would be held in their home state of Vermont in a very rural farm called Coventry in Orleans County. You know, tiny country roads after you get off the highway kind of thing. Rolling greenery, just beauty, and rural mountain air. It should have been amazing, but it ended up being catastrophic in some ways, and poetic, and all points between. So what do you need to know going in? Because I initially cut this intro and it was like 16 minutes, and I don't think that we want to just hear me talk about Coventry for 16 minutes and then read my own report from Coventry or an excerpt. So I'm going to try to just give you all the bullet points. They'd been a band for 20 years. It was 20 years ago. They were going to retire, mostly because they were just a mess on stage and off. Trey has long acknowledged crippling, debilitating drug addiction, opiates. He was arrested about 2 years and change after this concert, not far from there in upstate New York by the Vermont border, and he's been sober for 17 years since. So we are all very grateful that that was not the end of this band on that weekend in Vermont. Now, the reason that it was catastrophic really has nothing to do with the fact that they were horrible performances. It's because the rain was nonstop in that region for over 3 weeks in the lead up and rendered the festival grounds just a sloppy, mushy, muddy swamp full of, what you have on farms, which includes manure. So it was smelly and it was wet. And to make matters worse, because of the slow going getting in due to the conditions, the traffic was backed up 20 plus miles onto the highway. State of emergency. People all have crazy stories about the journey to and the experience getting in or getting turned away from Coventry, because on Saturday morning, 8 or 9 hours before the shows were supposed to begin, Mike Gordon, the bassist of the band, as well as a state trooper, got on the radio station that broadcasts to the Phish Festival called The Bunny and told everyone if you were not off the exit, the interstate, onto Route 5, that you would not be able to exit and that they were turning people around. And from there, shit got crazy. So that's what this podcast is about. We're not going to talk about the concerts themselves. We're going to talk about the journey. And this was born out of a recently released documentary called Jam, the documentary. It's 27 minutes long. It's been in the works for 20 years. The filmmaker himself, ALEX DALTAS, is my final guest for episode 80 of the Upful Life podcast. So after we do the oral history, we're going to hear from the director, filmmaker of Jam, the documentary, all about the making of the film and his experiences at Coventry and finding the people after the fact and getting all this footage and information together. But before we do that, I put a call out to the community, some friends, some randoms, to hear their Coventry stories in 3 to 5 minutes. I had very little time to put this together. I only thought this podcast up 10 days ago, give or take. I always wanted to do something for Coventry, but once I talked to the director and watched that film, I realized, you know what, I should just do just holler at my people and see what comes back. So that's what I did. Plus, it was all dudes at one point, so I asked, could some women please come forward? And word traveled out, and I did get some fantastic contributions from female Phish fans as well. So that's where we're at with it. It's a loosely connected oral history of Coventry 20 years later. I myself was also in a crippling pharmaceutical opiate addiction at the time of Coventry. It was in its infancy. It lasted the better part of another decade. So my own reflections and recollections are pretty fuzzy and foggy too. But I'm grateful for everyone who hollered, who contributed. Shout out to all my Phish friends and family from the 90s till now. I love you. I wish I could be at Monday Green with all of you. I haven't been to a Phish festival since Coventry. My relationship with the band has changed markedly since Coventry. But this really isn't about that. This is about the traffic jam, the weather, community, villaging, and no holds barred, whatever it takes. Gotta get to the show. So with that, here comes an oral history of Coventry, Phish's, quote, retirement shows, August 14 and 15, 2004. Yes, indeedy.
Plenty of open space around the concert site shows just how many people and their cars have not made it to Phish's water-plagued grand finale in Coventry. The area is a sea of mud, including in front of the stage. State police closed off any further entry to the site after they decided far fewer cars would fit because of all the mud. Interstate 91 became a parking lot. Although concert goers were turned back, it appeared few were willing to go back. Instead, they just abandoned their cars. Police estimate 2,500 vehicles left on the shoulder, on the median, in U-turns, or anywhere. And they just started walking. It would be a long walk, as much as 15 miles. Occasionally, a vehicle packed beyond capacity dared to go where police said no one could go. Other concert goers waited for a ride from local Vermonters who were willing to help out for a fee.
Right now, it's a park and shuttle. Until we get stopped, we're going to try to shuttle everyone in.
All right. First up here, we've got Garrett Woodward. He's a reporter with Rolling Stone magazine and the Smoky Mountain News down there in Asheville area. I met Garrett a couple years ago in Park City, Utah, where he's headed this weekend for the 3rd annual Park City Song Summit. I've been down there twice. It's a fantastic time. But in his travels, Garrett was kind enough to hit us with his Coventry tale. So we start with Garrett and then right into M.A., Michael Allegretto, who doesn't do very many, if any, podcasts, but heard my call and submitted a detailed reflection in a melodious baritone and very deliberate pentameter. Fantastic voice, M.A. And Michael Allegretto is a legend in festival production. His name rings out in those streets, and he was a part of a number of the 1.0 Phish festivals with GNP and associated partners who literally built Coventry and much that came before it from the ground up, and has been a part of more festivals than I can count. So M.A. is up in the 2 slot. And then we hear from Beth from Chicago, who I do not know, but was one of several contributors who found out through the miracle of the interwebs, about 50-50 split between homies and randos. So Beth will be up 3rd, and then I'll be back to introduce the next round for this oral history, 20th anniversary of Coventry.
My name is Garrett Woodward. I am a writer for Rolling Stone and also the Smoky Mountain News, based out of the Asheville, North Carolina area. I'm 39 years old, but when I was 19, I attended Coventry, what was supposedly going to be the last Phish show. At that time, I was in college in Connecticut, but actually grew up in the Champlain Valley in Plattsburgh, New York area, which is just across the lake from Burlington, Vermont, Lake Champlain. So growing up in that area, you pretty much come out of the womb with a Phish album, and they were and remain a band at the pillar of what I love about music. The spontaneity, the creativity, and just those you had to be there moments, which is what I continue to chase after as a music journalist. That said, when I was 19, I was really sad, just like everybody else, that Phish was supposedly going to break up. And at the time, my girlfriend and I were going to go to Maine to visit some friends and whatnot, and then work our way back above Coventry through the Newport area so we could avoid the rush that was coming in from the south. And we showed up at a campground in Newport the day before everything was going to open, and it was nice and sunny, and it was a beautiful day out. And we had heard over the radio and through the grapevine that they were opening the gates early since they wanted to get people in as soon as possible with, I guess, what they had at the time thought was going to be a pretty muddy situation, which it turned out to be so. And we packed everything up at the campground we were staying at, and we bolted for Coventry. The line wasn't too bad. I knew some back roads, so the line wasn't too bad. I'd say we probably waited in there about 4 or 5 hours and got in. And that first day, it was sunny. It was beautiful out. We were on the side of the property that wasn't too muddy. It wasn't too chaotic yet. It was just beautiful out, beautiful farmland. And then as things started to worsen in terms of what was going on at the gates and on the other sides of the property, we had heard Mike over the radio that they were going to close everything. And that's when we started hearing rumblings about people walking in from the interstate. I remember there was people camping next to us that had walked 20 miles with their cooler held between the two of them and all their camping gear. And even in hindsight, it's just insane to think that these people did that. And it was such an incredible testament to the band that people were willing to literally just ditch their vehicles on the side of a interstate highway and walk everything, down these back roads, and hours and hours and hours of walking. Obviously, the mud was the big issue, beyond the sadness of the end of the band that we all loved. I do vividly remember people's shoes getting sucked off. The mud was so thick, it was at least a couple inches above your ankles. I remember so many people around me getting their sneakers sucked off, and people just gave up. Birkenstocks gone, Nike, Reebok, everything gone. It was so interesting to walk around and just see all these shoes that were just discarded. People just gave up and decided to just walk around barefoot. Safe to say, when you think about it, I actually had this thought recently. I wonder how many shoes are still underneath the ground of that farm all these years later. I mean, there has to be some. There was just so many that got sucked into the abyss, the muddy abyss. It was just an incredible experience. It was something I'll never forget. Even though the band came back eventually, it was just a sad weekend, but it was a beautiful weekend. There was a lot of friends that I knew that I ran into and a lot of friends that I made. Obviously, the waiting in the Velvet Sea was just stunning and sad, and, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't crying in the crowd, too. And I remember when they had to redo the curtain width, and at that moment, we knew the festival was coming to an end, so my girlfriend and I knew it was going to be a zoo to get back to our car and back to everything else. We had packed up earlier in the day and parked the car outside of the venue so we could just hightail it out of there, because it was just such a zoo and such a mess at that point by Sunday. So I remember we walked out of there as they were playing the curtain width, and just the sadness of knowing that, one of your favorite bands was over. And I felt really happy to be there, and it meant a lot to be there. And I remember we had to hitchhike back to the vehicle. We jumped on the back of some tractor. Some farmer was giving rides. And we just went back and hopped in the car in the middle of the night and drove back to Plattsburgh, and just had kind of this somber feeling that we had witnessed something incredible, the end of something incredible, but also the beginning of what now. And I know I'm not alone in that sentiment when I think about that what now, because there's a lot of us that were wondering what we were going to do in terms of seeing bands and going on tour, and even just our own lives. You know, I was in college, and there was a lot of college people there at that time. Obviously, a lot of us are grown up now in our 30s, 40s, and 50s. But it was a very special time and place, and it's something that I've been thinking a lot of this summer as we now have crossed over the 20-year mark.
As you can hear in the winds of this area, since we're going to be bringing ourselves back in time, we might as well do it in the correct key. So, bear with us, please, because I so desperately want to play this song, and we started it off a half step off. So now we're going to go to E flat, the very key it was written in.
Phish, Coventry, 2004. The build started in Coventry about 2 weeks after my son Daniel was born, early August 2004. I left my parents and my in-laws with my wife and flew to Vermont for what was to become one of the most challenging events I had ever been part of. On arrival, it was a pretty small core team, and I had already commissioned a couple of locals to build roads through the various farms whose owners we had agreed to lease the land from, several hundred acres from 3 property owners and also the local municipal airport in Coventry. On one of my first site visits, when I mentioned building roads through the fields to the landowner, he told me there was no need to because they drive 18-wheeler semi-hay trailers for collection in August through those fields, no problem. To be safe, I hired the contractor who built a portion of I-91, and Omer proceeded to build the roads as planned. Also hired another local who was one of the landowners, and he built the roads on his property. As the build crew streamed in, so did the steady flow of rain non-stop. The build team was in good spirits, and knowing it would be Phish's last show, they rallied to make this event the best. The weather, however, had other plans. We continued with the road preparation and the site construction while a local production team led by Kevin Margolin and Ron Anderson and the visual design team led by Russ Bennett added their installations at the core to bring the site to life. Mike Penner from CSS built the stage and site elements. Due to the constant stream of water in front of the stage, some of the supporting dunnage under the stage left offstage pier began to wash out. Omer and heavy equipment to the rescue. I'll never forget him saying, "Mike, the only thing we can't fix is broken hearts." I got that on video and a ton of other never-seen-before footage of behind the scenes. As Friday approached and the rain continued, the forecast was pretty grim. Half of our real estate was underwater or completely saturated. It wasn't mud. It was essentially liquid soil. It was then that we started hearing the advisories from the state police as we tried to determine other off-site parking options and push for the show to go on. After the press conference about not letting any more cars in, the build crew pretty much continued their efforts in site preparation. I ordered about $70,000 worth of wood chips because the local quarries were closed that weekend, and the only thing available was wood chips. There were close to 100 loads, and they were dozed into place, and they barely finished before the crowd burst through the barriers and down into the venue. Great Northeast and all the vendors that were on our team made the best effort we could to show, the show must go on was the attitude. And despite the adverse conditions and biblical rains that broke 50 years of records of rainfall, we made the show happen. The cleanup after was monumental. I hear there are still shoes popping up from the surface and winter freezes there. I'm grateful to all the locals who helped Phish fans get to the site and to the fans themselves for having the tenacity to push through despite the conditions, even if it meant abandoning their RVs, as so many had abandoned their vehicles on I-91 and walked into the venue, which is inspiring to see. A memorable event, no doubt.
Hi, this is Beth calling from Chicago with some 20 years later memories from Coventry. So I made the drive solo from Chicago, was going to be meeting up with some folks out east. And one of the things I remember so vividly from the drive was that when I basically got to the border, I think I was on the border between New York and Canada, it really felt like I was like driving off the end of the world. I'm like, where am I? The weather was kind of misty, and I was just sort of driving along this fence, and I was like, it just felt like there was like nowhere else to go except east into Vermont, which I did, made it onto the highway. Got stuck on the highway with thousands and thousands of other folks. Remembered a very funny moment. Because I was alone in my car, when I had to go to the bathroom, it was very interesting. I think there was had to go number 2 and had to ask someone to just like sit in my car and move it forward inches if we happened to move while I, walked off the side of the road and find a place to go do that. Anyway, finally made it over to that last 10-mile stretch on the interstate. I don't remember if they'd already made the announcement to kind of turn around if you hadn't made it in yet, but it was right when people were starting to kind of ditch their cars and walk in. But I was on that last stretch and I'm like, I think I can make it. I was nervous to ditch my car. But as I was driving in that last stretch, I saw it was a group of 4 kids. I call them kids. They were maybe 15 or 16 at the time, walking in with all their stuff. And I was alone in my car, so I had a little bit of space. So I said, hey guys, I don't have room for all of you, but you can put your stuff in my car if you want to, and I'll drive it in for you. And then at least they won't have to schlep so much stuff on that 10-mile walk. So I had room up in the front seat. So one of them got in the car, promptly, fell asleep. The rest of them piled all their stuff in the back, and I drove it all in for them. Finally made it in. I remember, I actually don't remember if I made it there first or if the kids that were walking made it there first. I think they made it there first. But met up with them. They collected all their stuff. They were so thankful. And they're like, thank you so much. Thank you, ma'am. And at the time, and also now, I was just like, ma'am? I was 27. So to me, that's not ma'am territory, but I guess when you're 15 or 16, it is. Finally got in the gates and drove for about 20 feet and promptly got stuck in the mud. So that was my getting into Coventry story. Actual festival, we'll let some others recap that. All right, happy 20th.
All right. That was a fantastic way to kick things off. That oral history. Thank you, Garrett, M.A., and Beth. Now we're going to hear from Mikey V, somebody I've known since I was a teenager. He says in his story he's calling in from New York, but he's really a Philly guy, and he can't run away from that accent. So Mikey V kicks things off. Then we hear from my boy Chuck Smash, somebody I met in Swanee, a dozen plus years ago, then reconnected in California, and then he and his lovely family moved to Buffalo. Chuck Smash with a fantastic story, followed up by Arrow. Arrow is a friend of a friend, was recommended for the pod, and she was one of the first to come through when I said, hey, I need some ladies here. So I sounded the alarm for some Phish chicks, and like Beth earlier, Arrow came to the rescue. So Mikey V, Chuck Smash, and Arrow on this oral history of Coventry coming right up.
This is Mikey V out of South Salem, New York, giving you my Coventry lowdown. It was a pretty interesting time for me. I spent the summer, that spring rehabbing pop-up camper that I pulled out of the woods. Put new speakers and lights, tapestries, nude seat covers, the works in it. Got it all ready for tour. Time I was living in Watertown, Massachusetts. A year out of grad school, teaching middle school. So I had lots of flexibility in the summer. The summer was like the mid-90s for me, with the Dead and Phish both on tour. And I was able to bring my newly crunched out pop-up to see the Dead and Phish, and use some entrepreneurial spirit to help finance my new adventure. After a few dead shows at Great Woods and SPAC, I hit the last part of the Phish from VT tour and wound up in a nice little caravan, including myself, my buddy's SUV, and a rented RV up to Coventry. Like everyone else, we stocked up like we were preppers headed into the Armageddon. Little did we know that our prepping would come in handy, just not how we planned. Cases of beer, tequila, burgers, and dogs wound up being the lifeline for so many people. The drive up was unremarkable until the dreaded standstill on 91. We got there late in the day on August 13th and pretty quickly realized there was a problem. By later that evening, we knew drastic measures would need to be taken. Soon after dark, tiki torches were planted on the side of the road, the grill came out, bags of mushrooms were opened up, and at that point we determined that there was a problem and we needed to fix it. We thought that after our little adventures on the side of the road that we figured out what the problem was. Hundreds of cars were either abandoned or were filled with people sleeping in them, making the standstill even worse. While the fungus certainly played a role in our decision-making, our plan to sneak attack the highway exit was still deemed viable. So at about 3 a.m., we got behind the wheels and drove what felt like 50 miles, even though it was probably much less, and got all the way to the exit off 91. It worked. We passed hundreds of cars with large gaps in between them and wound up pulling right into town, and a few hours later right onto the runway and parked in a line of campers and RVs right on concrete on the approach to the venue. We literally had the perfect spot. Like a well-mushroomed machine, we set up camp, including a disco, our grill, coolers, lounge, and our own bathroom right on the tarmac. As we took a collective breath, the stories of our friends' journey started to pour in. Hiking, tractor rides, pickup trucks, and cars stuck in the mud with no supplies and some with no tents or sleeping bags. Our Armageddon prepping ensured that we had plenty of food and beverages for a crew of about 50 people who wound up gathering at our little compound. We had friends sleeping on floors, sharing beds, and getting cozy with people from all over the country. The personal highlight of the weekend was a pretty wonderful rendition of Mexican Cousin by yours truly with a handle of Cuervo on a cooler right in the middle of the tarmac that inspired a massive sing-along. The fact that I have any memory left of the weekend is astonishing, but I'm glad to hold on to them. Special shout out to Myers, Georgia, Todd, Harris, Sarno, Johnny, Kaplan, and the rest of the planned and impromptu Coventry crew. That's my story, and I'm sticking with it. Peace.
Saxophonist.
So 2004, it's about 2 weeks before my 21st birthday, and my buddy Mark pitches me in the idea of running a clandestine cheeseburger op out of the back of a utility trailer on the Phish lot. He works at Fuddruckers, and so he's able to finagle some sort of backdoor deal where 300 burgers and buns fall off a truck into our coolers. Well, we throw them on a utility trailer and hit the road, and about halfway between Buffalo and Coventry, we lose the transmission of our vehicle in Amsterdam, New York. And the car that was following us continues on because it wasn't clear if we were going to be able to make it. So we ended up getting a replacement car the next day and then drove into the line. And anybody that was there remembers the line. And after a couple of hours, people start getting hungry. And we, meanwhile, have these frozen burgers in the back of our trailer. So we're like, hey, let's just start hustling right here on the side of the interstate. So we start selling burgers right off the back of the trailer. Don't take the grill off because, again, we're moving with traffic. And so we were grilling in a moving utility trailer while people are running, following us and running after us with their plates, with their buns and pasta salad and everything else, making sure we didn't drive away with their money. But after a little while, the announcement gets made that they're closing the gates and not letting anybody else in. And so we're still about 9 miles away, which wouldn't be a problem, except I'm 2 months out from ACL reconstruction. So I'm thinking this could end pretty poorly for me. And so we go and start walking, and then we're going over an overpass, and I see down the embankment on this country road, there's a bunch of locals pulling up in a line offering rides to the festival goers to drive them up to the concert grounds. And so me and the people I'm with are like, sounds great, let's go down there. And so who pulls up but a middle-aged woman who's driving this rusted-out late model Buick LeSabre with blown shocks, bad struts. We even had to stop halfway up the mountain to get more transmission fluid. I don't even know how that happens. She has an 8-year-old in the passenger seat, and she's drinking beers, just chugging these beers, going around these mountain roads at top speeds, one hand on the steering wheel, one on a can of Coors. And so she's like, oh yeah, a friend of mine owns the property that's next door to the venue, and he can get you into some back gate or whatever. So we're like, that sounds good. So we arrive at her friend's place and get dropped off, and it's literally just in the middle of a forest. There's nobody in sight. It's just me and some guy that we've never met before. Me and our friends and some guy we've never met before. And he goes, oh yeah, pay me $20 each, and you can walk through my property, follow down through these woods, like 3 miles. It involved wading through a stagnant pond. We had to do a leech check at the end of it, stand by me style. And sure enough, we end up at a collapsed fence, and that on the other side of the fence is the venue. And we're like, this has got to be a trap, right? So we peek our head in, nobody in sight. It's kind of a big clearing. And so then we step out into the clearing and walk about 100 feet into the venue. And who do we see? The same group of friends who we lost in Amsterdam, New York. And the rest of the weekend went off without a hitch.
Hi, my name is Arrow, and this is my story of Coventry. My brother and I decided we were going to do Coventry together. We had been doing Phish shows together since '96, so we bought flights from Richmond, Virginia, with the plan to meet a bunch of our friends in Burlington when we got there, and then we were going to get a rental car, drive in, and do the whole thing together. So there we are at the airport in security, and immediately we get flagged because my brother has stupidly packed a pair of brass knuckles in his bag. So now they're giving us all this, trouble about violence and what are we trying to smuggle onto the plane and who are we and all this stuff. My brother ends up getting a citation written for him, but they let us get on the plane and we end up in Burlington. So we're a little rattled to start, but once we get there, we realized very quickly that my luggage did not make it to Burlington. And this is a problem because it has a lot of our camping gear in it and all of my clothes and things that I'm going to need for the weekend. So we wait around for a couple of hours, hoping that my luggage is going to show up. It does not. And finally, we meet up with our friends. We drive to Walmart. We rebuy a bunch of the stuff that I already had packed. And we visit Nectar's, and then we start our voyage in. And luckily, one of our friends decided that we were going to go the back route. And so we did end up getting in, even though they were closing it and turning people away. We snuck in through a back route and got in there. But immediately upon arrival, I start my period. And this is fabulous because I'm wearing my brother's clothes all weekend because, they lost my luggage. And so we're welcomed by this mud pit, and all I have is my tent. I'm wearing my brother's clothes, and I'm dealing with my period and outhouses and mud sinking to the knee around the outhouses. And that's pretty graphic and trauma-inducing in itself. But then we get there, and there's just so much thievery. It's like as soon as you go away to the show, you come back and your shit's been ransacked and all your stuff is missing and lots of that. So between the mud and the security and starting my period and then the stage sinking and the thievery, it made for an interesting weekend. But we had a blast. We rallied anyway. And I showed up at the Burlington airport covered in mud in my brother's clothes, which I promptly threw away. And they had my bag, lo and behold, by the time it was time to leave. And so I was able to quickly change into my own clothes and try to get home from a very traumatic, very funny weekend where I was dressed like a dude all weekend. But we had a good time. And my brother... It's one of my fondest memories of my brother. He passed away. He's gone now, but it was a wonderful weekend together, and I wouldn't trade it. So thanks for letting me share.
Word. Thanks, Mikey V, Chuck Smash, and Arrow. Appreciate the contributions. Everybody's tale is so different, although we do have some Venn diagram going on for sure between the hiking and the cooking on the side of the road. Sliding in at the 11th hour with a last-minute contribution is one of my bestest friends in the whole wide world. Her name is Maria. Now, we only met in 2010, or 2009. So Coventry was before I had the pleasure and honor of being her dear friend. So some of this is new to me. But we were both at Coventry, of course, and she saw my post on social and was like, what the hell, why didn't you ask me? So, of course, I had to part the podcast in the middle like the Red Sea and roll out the great Maria for this brief but hilarious tale of her experience at Coventry.
Okay, here he goes. I'm a 48-year-old Coventry survivor. I can't believe it's been 20 years since we all thought the world was going to end because our favorite band was calling it quits. I don't have a lot of memories from Coventry. I think my brain was purposely trying to put all of that mess away in some hidden cave. But I do have this distinctive visual imagery of looking in the rear view mirror of my car as we were going through the gate after spending 37 hours in line, watching the gates being closed as we could hear the announcement on the radio. We're like baffled at the amount of people behind us that were being left behind. The second memory was the run to the first set of porta potties that I saw, because after 37 hours in traffic, I really, really had to go. And when I got there, the bro porta potties were sort of like half sunken in, like the big boy burger dude sculpture from It Festival. And there was a caution, like a crime scene caution, red caution tape around the entire row of porta potty with a giant sign that just said, danger, no. Not like closed or out of commission, just danger, no. I bet I still have a picture of that somewhere in a box. And then the third thing that I remember was standing in the field after the band had played the last set and watching everybody just kind of like storm out, like angry, sad. There were so many different emotions being displayed. And we just stood there like baffled at what we had just witnessed. And we stood there for so long that the green crew started coming around with trash bags, and we just like looked at each other and just grabbed a trash bag and just started picking up stuff. And it was probably some of the grandest, best ground scores of any festival in my festival going career. So that's it, folk. That's Coventry for you.
Maria, Maria. She remind me of a West Side Story.
Alas, let's hear from Josh Blake. Josh is a homie. I'm also a huge fan of his music, his solo stuff, his work with GFE, Granola Funk Express. During the pandemic, Josh was on this pod when I was doing like 4 15-minute chats per episode instead of one guest. So he is familiar to the Upful Life audience. He's also got many, many Phish miles under his belt. We actually met in person, like for real, at Phish Tahoe many moons ago. And he's also got an episode on this pod in the pipeline coming up this fall. So look for that. So we're going to hear from Josh Blake from GFE with a fucking great story. And then we're going to hear from Ravenna, who is up there in Grass Valley, Nevada City area, and closely connected to one of my favorite local music rooms in the state of California, and that is the Crazy Horse Saloon. She is married to Tyler Blue, who's a super homie, and he runs that spot. So Ravenna will be up after Josh Blake. Then we're going to hear from Connor, who is all the way live from the 215.
Yo, what's up, everybody? This is Josh Blake, and I'm going to tell you my story from Coventry. We actually went to the festival, my band, GFE, Granola Funk Express. We had a bunch of dates planned for afterwards. So the festival we got there kind of early, so we missed a bunch of the mess. And other than that, our hang there was relatively uneventful. But we had two shows planned directly afterwards at Club Metronome in Burlington. And these were back-to-back, and they were billed as post-Coventry, after-party, whatever. So they were both sold out. And the first night, what happened was I was taking a break. There was a song where the MCs were beatboxing. I didn't have to play. So I went around back, and I was hanging out behind the backstage at Club Metronome. It's this rooftop, and some kids were back there. And this one dude was a glassblower, and he was showing me his pipe that he had just blown, and he was like, check it out, da-da-da. And all of a sudden, all these cops started jumping off the rooftops. We just saw them falling out of the sky. And I was like, this isn't good. So I immediately started to beeline it for the stage. I went back to the backstage, and I started kind of hurry because it was a sold-out venue. And I was like, if I get on stage, I'll be invincible. These cops won't be fucking with us. But as soon as I got to the stage and as soon as I put one foot on it, all of a sudden a cop tried to grab me from behind, and this is in front of a packed house. And then Cactus, my homeboy in the band, actually went and jumped off stage and tackled the cop and tried to yank him off of me. And absolute chaos from there. You can imagine the police came in. There was a packed crowd. We had the microphones, what's going on? Blah, blah, blah. Nobody knew the origin of what had happened and why the police were chasing me into the venue. I ended up having to go to jail because I had this little small piece of weed in my pocket that they took me in for. And but the beauty of it was I was out the next morning, and we still had another sold out show. So that night we began the show with one of our punk rock songs called "The Cops Smoked All My Pot and Now They Want My Money." And the people went nuts, and it was absolutely fantastic. I ended up getting a fine. I had to do some community service, so I came back down here to Asheville, North Carolina, and held a benefit to build a sprinkler system in a local daycare, and got the daycare to sign off on it and sent it back, and everything was cleared and done. But yeah, that was the silver lining there from the situation, and it was a crazy experience. It was something I'll never forget. Anyways, anybody going out there this weekend, enjoy yourselves, be safe, have fun, and we'll see you at the next show. Peace.
It don't matter, I'ma have a stash. Good weed, real keef, and Turkish hash. Fuck them all, they just want tax. All the weed that you smoke when you wanna relax. You can grow it in your backyard, just like that. Imagine not having to pay for your sack. Come on. Hey, 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 now is the fall. Everybody get hot.
Hi, this is Ravenna Marisa Blumara, and this is my Coventry story. I want to start out by saying that I was going to make a shirt after my experience that said on the front, I survived Coventry, and on the back it was going to say, barely, with a crazed face. We hadn't traveled for Phish since 1999. We had a great friend in Vermont. We were going to be one of the first people in. We ended up being in the top 10 vehicles. We got in, we were psyched for our spot. We got there, the hurricane came about. We were like, what is happening? How's this going to go down? We traveled to see our friends over on the other side. barely got back to our campsite and realized, wow, we're not even going to be able to camp. We're going to have to stay in our Aztec, the one that Walter White had. The big cooler we trucked across the country, our tent, everything, none of it was used. We just slept in the vehicle, my husband in the back seat, me and the bird, like a nest in the back. So we barely got to the show. I sunk knee deep in mud a couple of times, got some injuries along the way. And then they brought in hay, which I was highly allergic to. Oh boy. So I sneezed for over 24 hours straight, and I said to my husband, there's no way I'm going to that last show. I'm going to stay in the vehicle. And I was mortified. But then I prayed to my angel guides, and Spirit said, just take some ecstasy. And I took some ecstasy, and everything was fine. We went to the show. We came back from the show. I was blissed out, obviously, even though the shows were the shows that they were. We were at our campsite late, and there were these people that had came wounded to our campsite, and they're like, we rafted into the show to get in for free. I went and got my first aid kit and helped them. Oh, it was so crazy. We had it good, actually. Even though we had found out that our spot was a sewage release area. So good thing we were in the Aztec. And then we were some of the first people out, which was amazing. We exited with our four-wheel drive Aztec, and they were telling us to go one way. And this local said to us, come with me, come follow me. And we followed him, went to our Airbnb. We were praising John, God, to the clean toilet and the shower, and slept for hours after drinking champagne by a lake. It was phenomenal and challenging and amazing. I'm laughing at it all right now. I survived, barely.
I took a moment from my day. My day and wrapped it up in things you said and mailed it off to your address. Get pretty soon.
Hey, my name's Connor. This is my Coventry story. So I wasn't planning on going at all. A good friend of mine called me up Thursday night, said he had a free ticket for me. I just had to pick it up from the University of New York. So sent it from Philadelphia with nothing but my car, a skateboard, and a cooler. Went up, got my ticket, got up in line to Vermont, about 6 miles back or so, and waited in line, fell asleep that night in my car, woke up the next morning and realized there was some spots open. So I started jumping up spots. Well, I got a little too greedy, and then there wasn't another spot to jump up. And I got all the way down to the exit. The Vermont State Troopers made me go to the next exit up, loop back around. When I came back down, I got in, I thought, a pretty nice spot. I was maybe 3 miles out. All of a sudden, a bunch of people come up to my car, maybe 10 people come up to my car and say, hey man, we've been here for like 30 hours. Like, there's no way you're just pulling your car in here. So one guy walks up and goes, hey man, I've been staring at this map for hours, but I've already invested so much time into this spot, I can't leave. But you can't stay at this spot, so you might as well take it. So I drew a crude little map on a piece of cardboard of these back roads of Coventry, Vermont, and found myself on a little back road, and about 2 miles now from the venue, I would say. Got in line there, made friends with the car that was directly in front of me, these two lovely girls from Key West, Florida. And at this point, it's getting close to showtime. It's getting close to, they're going on stage. So we made an agreement, hey, we're about to leave our cars here and just hike in and just do it that way. All of a sudden, this pickup truck comes from out of the woods through this little field, and the two girls go up, start talking to the guy and his wife that are in the truck. They're locals. They invite us back to their house. They say, hey, you can park your car on our lawn and we'll drive you right to the front gate. We'll drop you off at the front gate. And so we go back to their house. They have a house. They have chocolate labs. So there's just all these little Labrador puppies running around everywhere. It was amazing. The guy is man of his word, drops us off right at the very front gate. Says, here's my phone number, here's my address, come back, when the festival's over. So we're at the festival. I go, all right, I got to go find my friends. All I have now is a cooler and a skateboard. So I got to go find my friends. So I left my cooler with the two girls and went and tried to go find my friends. My friend Tony found me because I'm the only idiot walking around a field full of mud with a skateboard. So he recognized me from a mile away, caught up with them, went back and got the cooler, and hung out with my friends all weekend. Had a great weekend, great time, lots of laughs, lots of hugs, lots of tears. It was very emotional. It's amazing, got a spring from the trampoline when that was getting ripped apart, So the festival itself was pretty amazing, but then leaving the festival, I had to figure out how the hell am I getting back to my car. So I go down to the front gate and I meet this girl from San Francisco named Tenley, and she said, hey, I'm flying out of Burlington. If you can get me to Burlington, she said, I'll get you back to your car if you get me back to Burlington. So I said, deal, let's make it happen. So we used this little crude map and, begged and bartered and traded our way to get a lift from another head. Took us back to my car. Took my car back down to Burlington, and she said, hey, a little friend of mine's band, Tea Leaf Green, from San Francisco, they're playing at Nectar's tonight. So I was like, great, I wanted to see Nectar's, and I figured that'd be a perfect bookend to my festival and my experience there. So went and hung out, ended up, making friends with those guys, and hung out with them, partied all night at their hotel room, and then, went back to our hotel room that the girl Tenley had got, and took her to the airport in the morning, and then headed back to Philly. It was absolutely amazing experience. Like I said, very emotional, but just, it was one of those things where that's kind of the magic of Phish is I wasn't even gonna go, and I had an experience that I'll never ever forget for the rest of my life.
All right. Thank you. Josh Blake, Ravenna, Connor. Another series of awesome tales, and we're going to finish up with JC, who's somebody I don't know, and was kind enough to tell her story, which has a bit of a sad ending in terms of, juxtaposed to some of these other happier endings. And then after JC, we're going to hear from one of my oldest friends. I met her at one of my first jazz fests. We've been in touch and friends across the miles and the years. Heather, down there in New Orleans. Huge heart, fantastic friend, and amazing human being. She checked in with a bit of a longer story, just a couple minutes longer than the others. But, she came through in short notice. And hers is, very relatable also. And I wanted to include her. So Heather, after JC. And then we're going to get into the interview with the director of the film, who tried to tell all these stories, in essence, in under 30 minutes. So coming up, JC and Heather, oral history, Coventry, 20 years later. Hope you are enjoying. Yes, indeedy.
So I had been to all the Phish festivals in the past, Great Went, Clifford Ball, all of them. So going to Coventry was no decision. It was just something I was going to do. And when we got there, we ended up in a parking lot on the highway at 91 North for the whole day, and we just weren't moving. So my friends who I was with, my boyfriend and our friend, decided to hitchhike in because I was with my car. And so they took their pack bags and left me. And when we were in the parking lot on the highway, I sold my ticket to someone else, and I was just going to head home as soon as I could move my car. But then I was stranded on 91 overnight, so had to sleep in the car on the highway. And then in the morning, everyone that I had made friends with around me was just parking their cars on the highway and walking in. And so I thought, well, I made it this far and everyone else is walking in, so I might as well go too, even though I had already sold my ticket. So took us a day to get there, walking the highway. There was thousands of people walking in, so it was pretty fun and easy. And then when I got there, the show was starting, and I didn't have a ticket, but that didn't matter because it was pretty bad shit show, to really put it in words, because when I got there, it was just all mud, but not just mud, it was cow manure, because it was basically on cow fields. And so after that show, there was no escaping, and I was knee deep in literal cow shit. And I had hiked with no belongings because I wasn't really thinking when I left. I just left my car, parked my car, and I didn't realize like how far of a hike it was to get to the show. But luckily my friends were already in and had spots and dry tents. And so they hooked me up, they cleaned me up, cleaned my feet up, gave me a dry tent, sleeping bag to sleep in. So it worked out from good friends. And I just didn't have any food. It was pretty chilly and cold, and the shows just were terrible. So the next night, I think it was like halfway through the show, Trey was terrible. The show sucked. So I basically hitchhiked back to the highway before the end of the festival, hitchhiked back to the highway to get my car to get out of there. And actually, I haven't been to a Phish festival since. It really was that bad. It was that bad. And, growing since, it would take a lot to get me to a music festival again because it was so bad. And that's my Coventry story.
What's up, everybody? Heather Bear here on the 20th anniversary from the Coventry Phish show in Vermont. Whew! Nothing like stopping to take a moment, walk back down memory lane. So, I was there, kind of. Let's see, I guess I first started going to Phish in 91, was my first show in Keene, New Hampshire. I was 13, so I'm kind of a lifelong Phish fan. And after I traveled around and left out of New England, was been on the West Coast for a while, in 2004, when I knew they were going to be in Vermont, their home state, I had to go to Coventry, had to go. So I've been making fish tacos was what I was making at that point in time. So I fly into Camden, actually, before the Coventry show. It was a killer show in Camden, actually. And we ended up the next day renting a van, going shopping, getting all my supplies, because I'm coming up to vend. I've been on Shakedown through the dead, and that's what I do. I get up and I cook and I sell food. You've probably seen me. You might have had a fish taco, a Corona, and a lime. So I'm shopping, getting everything ready, heading up to Coventry. Got a friend of mine from New Orleans with me, and we're going to vend. And thousands of dollars of food and drinks and, the vehicle, the tickets. I had a lot of money invested into that trip. And we get up into the traffic. And I don't know, like maybe 10 hours, 12 hours in line just trying to get in. It is jammed up bad. And once we get through, I don't know, I'm like an hour from getting in. We're so close. Mike Gordon comes on the radio, tells everybody the things that you like, the announcement you don't want to hear. Show's been canceled, too muddy, no one else can come in. But the deal was they were still going to play their concert that night, but if you weren't already in, then you couldn't get in. You had to leave your vehicles. No more vehicles were allowed. So it created pandemonium on the highways. People start literally leaving their cars, some in the middle of traffic. But most people were pulling off into the medians. The medians became a parking lot. There was hundreds of vehicles. I'm not exaggerating. Hundreds of vehicles abandoned. People just didn't care about their cars anymore. They had to get in. They had to go see the show. So it became a nightmare. It was already a nightmare trying to get in, but now the show's canceled. Now you got cars stopped. The drivers are gone. It's just a mess. A lot of the locals in the area start opening up their yards to people to come and camp and everything. So, that's when you see the good part of our community is when things aren't going right, that people step up and try helping people out. There was locals offering four-wheelers, get on their four-wheeler and they'll bring you in through the trees. You don't even got to go in through the main gate. There were so many options I could have got in, but ultimately I decided eventually not to go because I had thousands of dollars of fish and food, and I had to go start returning all this food before it went bad. No ice, just nightmare, absolute nightmare. Super bummed, heartbreaking situation. It's like, first of all, to have Phish play a festival in Vermont, I mean, what else could be better? The Phish from Vermont in Vermont doing their thing. So we all were looking forward to it. Thousands of us were ready. Now, what did happen that night is they ended up playing the concert and they broadcasted it on the radio. So I remember there was somewhere they opened up for the Phish fans, like a fairgrounds maybe, or some kind of parking lot. There was something they opened up for everybody where you could go. They're going to amplify the whole show on loudspeakers, and a bunch of people were going there. And I could have gone there, but I didn't. I was over it. I was ready to go start returning this food, start getting out of there, and ended up going to this place in Vermont called Lake Willoughby. It's my favorite place. Go hang out and go swim. So I went to my favorite lake. It was like maybe 30 minutes from where Coventry was or something, maybe an hour. We could still hear the show. We were within radio range. And we sat on this lake, sobbing, crying, bitching, moaning, that we couldn't get in. It's just a complete mess, man. Oh, man. But nonetheless, when you get into situations like that, when you see a community come together, there's always something that comes from a bad time. And if you can make the most of it, you're doing the best. I lost a lot of money. It was not a good situation. I might have even lost my friend for a couple of years because we argued so much about what to do, and we both lost out so much money, and it sucked, man. It was horrible. It was left a bad taste in my mouth, and the band was kind of like in that dark, struggling moment. Trey was a mess. It was kind of just buried it. I kind of buried everything around that time with Phish. I didn't even see him for a few years afterwards. The breakup happened, and then it took me a while to even get back into seeing a show again. It might have been a good 7 or 8 years before I went back to a show. I was just so it was left a bad taste in my mouth. But nonetheless, good to look back and walk down memory lane and remember these times. And that's what these memories are for. You gotta look back and remember your own stories and tell them. So that's my story. I was at Coventry. Well, like I said, I kind of was. 2004, 20 years ago. Whew. All right.
Yes, indeedy. Want to say thank you and a deep bow of gratitude to all the contributors who threw down on short notice and came through with those just phenomenal, colorful, occasionally, heart-wrenching and super personal recollections of their unicorn Coventry journeys. No two were really the same, and it was a joy to wade through those memories that everybody turned in. And I want to just say that I'm so grateful for the short notice and the quick turnaround and the enthusiasm. I imagine some of those purges were a bit cathartic, maybe even traumatic, but really made for some great storytelling. And that's what we're aiming to do here on the Upful Life podcast. And speaking of storytelling, I have filmmaker ALEX DALTAS, the man behind the brand new Jam the Documentary. That's the title, Jam the Documentary. And it's all about the Coventry traffic jam and the chaos and the creativity that shone through as people did whatever they could to get through the traffic and the drama and experience what they thought would be the final Phish show. So for 20 years, Alex has had this videotape that he himself shot, ran out of tape before the festival even started, and he collected footage from, news stations and locals, and he sought out different people that had different roles, both locals at the general store and people from the area that lived or worked near where the event was being held, to the promoters and the production people. He really, checked a lot of boxes here. And the film is 27 minutes, at least this cut is. You can rent or buy it for 99 cents or $1.99. And the link will be in the show notes, as well as a link to read a little bit about how this film came together in terms of different partners and investors and, getting left at the altar and frustrations. He really fleshed out his own personal experience and journey in making this film. So we do that in this interview, but if you'd like to know more, there will be links in the show notes as well as the film. So his name is ALEX DALTAS. He's based in Los Angeles, but he's originally from the Northeast. And he was a filmmaker already as a youngster, just kind of getting his feet wet in the industry when he embarked on the Coventry adventure. And then for 20 years, another adventure was making the film. So let's hear from Alex himself all about Jam the Documentary and his reflections on Coventry. Episode 80 of the Upful Life podcast. I'm your host, B. Getz. Yes, indeedy. Well, it is a treat. It is August of 2024. That means 20 years since a landmark event for many of my listeners and people across the nation, fans of the band Phish, and of course, just people who pay attention to rock music culture. We're talking about Coventry, what was supposed to be the final Phish concerts in August of 2004. And what do you know? I'm perusing Reddit the wee hours the other night, and I come upon this huge post about this documentary film project, DIY by a fan, that's taken 20 years. And honestly, I was so just stoked that this was coming. And then I decided, what the hell? I'm going to reach out. And Alex here, the filmmaker himself, was kind enough to make some time right away, because we're up against it. We want to get this out for the 20th anniversary. And you're very accommodating. And the film is fantastic. I've been through it twice. So without any further ado, this is Alex, and the film is called Jam the Documentary. Welcome to the Upful Life podcast.
Thanks so much. I mean, I'm very, very happy to be here, and it's been a long journey. So this is again, just really appreciate you reaching out, and a lot to unpack.
Absolutely, and that's what this podcast is about. It's a long form show, storytelling, cultural anthropology. I'm a huge Phish fan. Obviously, I've seen shows going back to 94, but it's also kind of a wider lens of music and festival culture at large. So I do feel like this, while it's going to be very Phish nerd oriented, at the same time, it'll be accessible to the average listener who's just interested in stuff that went down in our sort of sliver of the musical universe. And I think we could also say that about the film. The film, my snap reaction was that there's enough nuggets in there for the Phish nerd, yet to put it on for somebody who's only moderately familiar, and it's a very engaging documentary. So let's just get the basics, man. Tell us about the film and about, you rolling it out at this time.
Obviously, it goes back to 2004. I mean, I grew up in the Northeast. I grew up in Massachusetts, and from a young age, I wanted to be in entertainment. So before I was a Phish fan, I knew I wanted to, be in that world. And then I found Phish when I was about, like 16, maybe 15, around there. Funny enough, it was like my childhood friend. It was like literally my first best friend. And his name is James. And he and I are literally, I don't even remember meeting him because we met in like daycare, and like our moms became besties. And anyway, he introduced me to Phish when we were teenagers. I was like, what's this? And went to my first show was in Providence, Rhode Island. And yeah, I mean, it was like a case of like, you kind of had to go to the show to like really appreciate it. And so, yeah, kind of from there, I got interested. And then my second show was Sugar Bush, was a Sugar Bush show. And I'm driving up there with him, hitching a ride, and we're driving to Vermont. He's like, hey, or I was like, hey, so like, how much do I owe you guys for the tickets? And they're like, oh, we don't have any tickets. I was like, oh, well, like how what's gonna happen? They're like, oh, well, we'll just go buy some from some scalpers or something when we get there, and I was like, okay, what if that doesn't work out though? Like if there's a problem? And like, oh, it's okay, we'll just climb up the backside of the hill, the ski mountain, Sugar Bush, and come down the other side and we'll be at the show. I was like, oh my God, what have I got myself into? So but we went and it was no problem. We were able to buy tickets from some resellers and it was all good. And that was just another, I guess that was kind of, it wasn't like a full-blown festival, but it was kind of that first taste of like, wow, like we're kind of isolated. We're kind of in our own world here. And it was super impactful. I just remember the people were so nice and, people bringing in drinks and they're just giving it to us. And so that's where the love affair with the band began. And so I was, all through my teens, just, way into them, started going to see shows and all that. And then, again, as I mentioned, I was into film and entertainment my whole youth. So I went to Southern California for college. So, and that was kind of like as Phish was starting to peak and go national. So like I had, friends at college, and I think like Billy Breathes had just come out at that point, the Phish's album. So it kind of, it continued that. So I basically relocated to LA. I got into USC Film School, and like I said, I was out there, and then I got my first job in the entertainment industry, and I'm kind of like a junior level development executive at this company called Trilogy Entertainment Group, which was run by these two guys, Penn Densham and John Watson. They did like movies like Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, and Backdraft, and Blown Away in like the 90s and all that. And so, and Outer Limits TV shows for Sci-Fi Channel and stuff. And so, I was working for those guys around that time, and when Coventry finally happened and was announced, and I'm like, all right, well, I gotta fly back home. I can't miss this. Me and my best friends from high school, there's like a crew of 4 of us, and 3 of them are in the movie. One of them didn't make it to Coventry, so he's not in it. And then so I went, and at the time I happened to own like a prosumer digital video camera, and I just brought it along. I had been kind of like, sneaking it into shows, like before people had cell phones and stuff. So it's kind of like more of a special treat to like, oh, can you get your own footage of a show or something like that, And nothing, just always kept for personal use or whatever. But So I had that on me, and I was just excited. I was not setting out to make any documentary about Coventry at all. I was just like filming stuff for myself and for my friends, but I started taping like as I was leaving Los Angeles. So like in the car to the airport, like that B-roll is all real. We're going to the airport. I ran into these other fans like in the terminal, and I was shooting them, and that's some footage that didn't make it in the movie, but like there were other fans just all flying from everywhere. And then I happened to sit next to this dude on the plane, and he's going to Phish. So like I just started sticking my camera in people's faces. It was just like kind of that kind of a mood, and everybody was cool and all that. So I was just documenting. We got to Massachusetts where my family my friends are based, and so we left from Massachusetts. It's kind of the Concord area, Lexington area, and from there to upstate Vermont to Coventry is like on a normal day, it's like a 4-hour drive, and we knew it would be a little longer because Phish festival traffic was always. We've been to other festivals, and it was always a little longer. But yeah, so I started again, just kind of just kept taping stuff, and then we finally hit the traffic, and it just kind of spiraled. I just got all of the. Obviously, at a certain point, we just realized we're like in a situation, and I still didn't think I was making a documentary about Coventry or anything. It was more like just to kind of pass the time. It was like fun to kind of capture the craziness, and it was something to do. There was nothing to do. We didn't have smartphones or anything. We didn't have much to keep us busy. We had the radio, and we were listening to the Bunny, which was the radio station that Phish had taken over, and so that's where we were getting our news and music. And they played the Camden, New Jersey Phish show that was the night before because we were going up early.
Wait, so let me make sure I understand correctly, not to interrupt you.
Yeah.
In real time, the Bunny was broadcasting Camden as you drove up on that. I guess that would have been Thursday
night. Yeah, they were. It was cool.
Wow.
They it was cool that they did that. Yeah, so it was just available there on the radio.
So set the scene for people who didn't go or don't have, like, obviously rural area, Coventry, etc. But like, so you pull into traffic, like you said, don't think much because traffic on Phish shows, certainly at Phish festivals. I don't know if you're at Big Cypress, but that was crazy traffic. So not abnormal. What was the scene like on arrival? And then like talk about how people just started to unravel, get emotional, get scared, get aggressive in terms of cutting people off. Like I want to hear, because I remember living it, but I'd like to hear that sort of downward spiral from your perspective.
Yeah, well, I've seen some footage online. There's, I think, some clips people have seen of some pretty angry people that were upset. I mean, everyone around us and in general, it was a pretty patient group. Although the stress was there, overall, but it was tense, and there's and I mean, as it dragged on, it's like, I mean, we're night one, like, okay, we're sleeping overnight in the car on Thursday night, and you wake up the next day and you're like, whoa, like we haven't been moving very much. It oscillated. I mean, I think people were making the most of it. We're just like, we weren't worried about it for a while because, to set the scene, fortunately, the concert was a 2-day concert. It was like 3 sets a day, starting Saturday late afternoon, and then a Sunday show. And again, we left that Thursday. And the reason we left early, and the reason a lot of people left early, was because the campgrounds were opening up early, and everybody knew by then it was a good idea to get there early. And they made this whole carnival out of it. There was like this whole town, all this like things to experience and see. So there was going to be stuff to do. So we figured we'd be in a bit early and maybe have like a whole day or whatever to.
But there was a problem. There was something that was causing the traffic and the issue in that, for those who don't know, is basically an unseasonable, unreasonable amount of rain for 3 steady weeks, basically till like Wednesday, right?
Yeah, it was it was record rain. It was like rain that area had not seen in like at least 50 or maybe 100 years. It was that bad, and it was just very constant. It had just been going on for days, so it just didn't stop. So yeah, and again, we didn't know what was happening. I mean, we knew there was bad weather, but we didn't know at a certain point, like, why is it taking so long? We were really kind of, there was no web. There was no Twitter. There's no way to get any kind of inside knowledge, literally, except from the Bunny radio. So we're kind of at their mercy. And I'm sure behind the scenes, they were trying to figure out, I mean, of course they would have updates. I mean, we were driving up, I think it was Thursday. Yeah. It was like before we hit the traffic, and this is a clip. It's in, I think it's at least in the trailer, where it's like, or no, it's the film, where it's like, you hear them on the radio and they're saying, tell your friends if they haven't left yet, don't come up yet, because the weather's so bad. And I think for a lot of people, a lot of reasons why, a lot of people didn't have a great experience, because that advice, had people who heeded that advice, that was some people's undoing. And people that didn't listen to that advice made it in, depending. So, the stress, I think, really didn't start till, things didn't really start unraveling until like Saturday. I mean, it was messed up. We were starting to get loopy. You know how like you're up really late and you just start getting the giggles because you've been up so late, you're like beyond tired. So like we were kind of goofy for a while. It wasn't until the announcement was made, and they had this announcement. So they finally, Saturday morning, right, the Vermont State Police finally determined that this level of traffic jam was just at a certain level. It was like kind of crisis level, where they had to do something. And so they decided to pick a spot, and that was going to be a cutoff point.
I have some really bad news that I have to report that I feel really badly about, and that's that because of how crazy the rain's been over the last few days and over the last few weeks building up, everything here is flooded, and we can't get in all the cars, and we have to start turning people away.
We just feel horrible about it. We've been sitting there for hours trying to figure out what we can do, and there's no options, that we have to turn people away.
Once we heard the announcement, I think that's when people's hearts really sank. I think people were actually, there's a lot of patient people all the way up until that, but that was really that sort of soul-crushing kind of moment for so many. And I have tape that, it's not in the film, but there were some people in our crew that were just getting, they reached their breaking point, and they're just, upset. There's no fights breaking out. There's no riots. It's a peaceful community. It's just, as you can imagine, it was just a big blow. And some of that footage is live, like at that in the film, when you see that little clip with the announcement, there's like a guy and he's sort of looks toward the camera, like that was real time. That's not like constructed. So that was kind of some of what was so powerful, is like that footage is like, there was like that real time footage of these like really pivotal moments. So
I remember it, vaguely, but I certainly remembered when I watched the film, and yeah, as a matter of fact, as I think you responded to my email when we first started communicating, and thank you for reading my story. For those who are listening, I actually,
yeah, it was great.
I covered Coventry for Jambase, one of four of us, four members of Phish, for different reviews. And that ended up really being prescient because, as I wrote, everybody lived their own Coventry, right? It was like very unique. And it began with what you're describing, but it obviously unfurled into just choose your own adventure kind of thing. And as you noted, depending on this decision or that decision, really spelled out like how it's going to go for people. But I wanted to just to tell people how my road to Coventry worked out. And I'll get kind of try to be brief because I just wanted to juxtapose to yours. So I'm from the Philly area. So yeah, I went to Hampton. I think I didn't feel well and I was worried I was getting sick. And so I skipped Great Woods and then I went to Camden, which is my hometown show, which is like where my last kind of show where I had all the homies, the hometown people I found Phish with. I went to college in Vermont. So I lived in Burlington for 5 years from 96 to 2001. So I also had like a super Vermont crew and then sort of like my tour kids friends, and Camden was jubilant in that regard. And given where they were at as a band at the time, like pretty good show for 2.0, the final run, whatever. I'm a fan of 2.0, but point being is I had a great show in Camden. And as I'm sure you know, Trey from the stage, very towards the end, he suggested that we wait and then drive the next day. Don't go Thursday night because it's terrible weather up there. You don't want to arrive in the middle of the night. They're having a hard time getting people in. It was brief, but he communicated what was going on.
I have to say one thing. Brad just came out here and whispered that to me that I'm supposed to convey that if anybody is driving up to Coventry, that there's some rain happening up there right now, and it's what they're finding is that the parking is moving in slowly. So they're saying that they're encouraging people to maybe like go up Saturday morning. Nothing's really happening Friday night anyway, but just to back up and let the traffic play itself out. So I've been told to tell you that, and now I've told you. And thank you. Thank you very much. Goodbye, you guys. Thanks.
And so our crew, which it was like 40 deep, you know, a couple like big passenger vans and SUVs or whatever, we had this like big discussion in the Camden lot with the fucking circus and nitrous and all the craziness going around. Like, what are we going to do about this? Because we lived nearby. My folks, my cousin Dan's folks, or the house he grew up in, etc. We could just go rest and regroup, or we could bolt, you know, and we had it out, pros and cons, you know, and everyone's like weary and wired. The cats that wanted to go won. So we went back to the crib, like regroup, shower. And a couple of us had those like, you know, primitive Motorola phones that you see one or two of them in the movie, but it wasn't like we could just like fire off text and communicate really fluidly. You know what I mean? So we took off and everybody drove up through the night, and we ended up on the way in Ticonderoga, New York, which is like a good stopover spot, not far from where Trey got arrested. There's a huge all-night Walmart. So a bunch of us rolled in there. Of course, we saw other tour kids in there. And our buddy who had skipped Camden and gone from Great Woods up there was like, dude, don't bring anything you ever want to wear again, and make sure you get some knee-high galoshes. So everybody bought like and boots at that Walmart at like 2 a.m. Now we're talking, or 3 a.m. even, like Thursday night, late. I've never really talked about this publicly, but we ended up getting up there. We got word about the traffic. We went way out of the way, all the way up to the Canadian border. Met a local who we paid, who like led our caravan of cars through this very, very like rural, primitive, tight. We could have never done this on our own with a map or anything, and just fed us right in. And then when we got dropped off, it was like right by the exit on this little tributary, like the cutoff point. And the confrontation that our cars had with the people that had been there for fucking 40 hours, and we're getting like led up and dropped off pretty close. And yeah, it got heated. You know, it was not peace vibes and patience as you described. As a matter of fact, quite the opposite.
Yeah.
And I could understand why people were heated, but we didn't do this to them, but we definitely were circumventing the fucking situation.
Yeah.
And so that's how we ended up getting into the festival, is that local move, and then like forcing us into the line at yeah. I mean, that's how it went down. So that's how I got in.
No, people were doing that, and you know, yeah, I remember we were seeing people in campers sort of passing people, and you know, people were kind of like, hey, they have a place to actually live, you know. We're stuck in our cars. But I didn't see any confrontations with that, but yeah, there were, you know, people were kind of trying to figure that out. It wasn't always clear, although you kind of probably know, you know, where you're supposed to be. And then, you know, police would come along later and try to straighten it out. But yeah, it got a bit Wild West out there.
Plus, you had people falling asleep in their cars, and then the traffic would start to move, and then people would get frustrated with the sleeping people, and they would go into the opposite lane. So then a bunch of cars start doing that. Then people started pulling their cars out into that lane to block people from doing that. So my recollection of those hours, excuse me, dawn, pre-dawn and dawn, when we were like going through the rural area, and then so it's just getting light out, and people were just cracked out and been in their cars forever, and people were doing crazy stuff to get in. And you know, I'm grateful that we did, but at the same time, I do kind of feel some type of way about the fact that you know, that move might have come at the expense of.
Yes, you have survivor's guilt. It's
exactly.
It's a real thing. Not to make light of actual survivor's guilt, but no, it's true. It's, I mean, you know, people, yeah, they all had a different Coventry. That line that you wrote stuck out to me so much, because knew that back then, knew that all these years. Like, there's going to be people that are very excited to see a documentary about this, and there's going to be plenty of people that are like, F you, why are you doing this? I don't want to remember this memory at all. And it's like, totally get it. Totally get it.
There's a comment in your Reddit post, a woman, I think it was.
Oh, yeah.
She was like, I don't want to watch this. That's a really dark time in our lives, drugs and this and that. And then another person commented that really stuck with me was they didn't get in, and they never went to see Phish again. And it was in the Phish Reddit. So obviously they still have some connection to it, because this is 20 years later, you're in the Phish Reddit. And the person was like, yeah, we got turned away, and I've never gone to a show since. The person was like, my life has changed a lot now, but this is still a sore spot. And that it's so, it's like, wow, you know, everybody had a different coverage. So I'm curious, because obviously it's been I've reviewed it. It's been reviewed ad nauseum. I've actually never listened to it. I don't really listen to a whole lot of Phish. I like to experience it live, which I've done over 200 times, but I'm not the type of dude that puts on a show occasionally, but it's not a regular thing. But I've never, except for this or that here, I've almost fully avoided Coventry, even though in the moment, I didn't hate it. Definitely had some train wrecks and some really ugly shit. It was just like all the colors, all the emotions, the whole journey in one really dark and difficult weekend. And still through all that, I felt the beauty and the community and loved it, and I was ready to turn the page, to be quite honest. But I know that's not everybody's experience. And because I had a pretty debilitating opiate addiction, not unlike Trey's, OxyContin for a long time, like Coventry, once there was no more Phish, then all I had to do was the pills. You know what I mean? It was, so that was not the end of a dark period for me. That was the shove into the abyss. And, you know, I'm 8 years off any opiates, but there was a time where my friends were worried about me being alive, like we were worrying about Trey being alive. So I've never really gone back to Coventry, like to watch or listen. But so I understand that person's total aversion. And at the same time, like when I reread my article after I watched your film twice, I was like, you know, I didn't hate it. I did not come away with like all traumatized, even though my mind tells me that was the case. So I'm curious, like in real time, what did you think? And then now, what do you think about like what your Coventry experience? Just
I'd say it's been very consistent. My feelings then and feelings now are it's kind of why I pursued it. I mean, if I didn't get into the show, you know, I wouldn't make a documentary, but I'm sure I'd be mad and be like, I want to forget that too. You know, if this had happened today when everyone had a smartphone, I also wouldn't make it, because it'd be like, okay, well, everybody can just, you know, everyone can just see this on TikTok. You know, there's plenty of footage. Like, enough said. But like so yeah, it wasn't until I got back to LA, I still didn't think, after I shot all that stuff. I mean, I was like, wow, that was pretty epic. But I mean, the joke was like, yeah, I should make a movie about this. Yeah, I'm sure people would love to see people sitting in traffic for hours. That's really entertaining. But I had a friend who, he's a filmmaker friend. He's not a Phish fan. He wasn't not even from America, you know, he's like from Portugal. He's a good friend. And he just saw the footage. I like showed it to him, and he was the first guy, my friend Fernando, first guy who's like, you've got to do something with this. I'm like, really? I'm like, you find this entertaining? He's like, yeah, this is fascinating. He's like, you should even make like you should write, because I was writing screenplays at the time. He's like, you should write a screenplay based on this too. It's such an incident. I'm like, really? I'm like, so it's kind of like, oh, okay. So it was kind of this first tip in my mind, because there's being a Phish fan, and then there's like, I always, you know, there's like the filmmaker side, and like I was always kind of cognizant that like, and I'm so glad that you said that you feel like it's kind of for, you know, accessible to like fans and non-fans, because that was always the goal. Like I didn't want to, you know, I went to film school because I loved like big blockbuster movies, like Spielberg movies and Lucas movies, and I didn't, you know, Phish is like one of those things. It's so hard to communicate to the average person. Like you can't. Most people don't even try, because it's like there's almost no point. I love the Jerry Garcia quote. I think he compared to Grateful Dead, which is a different band, but you know, kind of same thing in the sense that they're outside the main culture. And he compared the Grateful Dead to like licorice. You know, most people don't like licorice, but for those that do, oh my God, they just love licorice so much, and like they couldn't get enough of it. And so I always felt like that was this awesome challenge. Like I found it so interesting. I was like, oh man, if there's an excuse here, like if this friend of mine thinks this is interesting, this could be like an excuse to communicate my love for this band to like anybody. And it's like a touch point. It may not be the touch point that most fans or a lot of fans think should be the touch point because of all the trauma and hardships. But that doesn't make it. What makes a great show is not what makes a great story. You know, and it did happen, and they did pull it off. And so, anyway, you know, that was the goal, was like, you know, try to walk that line where it's authentic to what it was, but didn't want to make like a sad piece. It was always about, you know, seeing the beauty in it, because I mean, 20 years gone by, you know, we've been through life, we've been through challenges, we've all been through stuff, and sometimes it's that really hard stuff that molds you, and then you get out the other side of that, and you know, you get to a much better place. That, you know, you kind of have to go through things sometimes, and we're not saying that's good. We're not saying, oh, we should aim for that. Nobody aims for that, but it's about putting things in perspective and trying to like see the value of all of it and go, what do we take out of this? We went through it. There's a value to it. What is it?
You mentioned kind of offhand, but it's essential to understanding the project, is you burned all your tape. So you don't really have a lot of like concert stuff. You have a little more still photographs and maybe some stuff from news, you know, programming, or you can let us know how you collected some of the stuff that wasn't from your camera. But the lion's share of your content, and probably what made your friend in Portugal tickle his fancy, had nothing to do with a band. It was like people in this like uniquely frustrating, helpless situation, but also having a great time. And when I asked you to set the scene before, it's like before everybody was parked or walked in, like people just get out of their cars. They're kicking a hacky sack, throwing a frisbee, making new friends, cracking beers, smoking joints. Back then you could smoke joints in Vermont pretty freely. It starts blissed out and you're okay for 4 or 6 hours of traffic, 8 hours, whatever, you know, and then you're getting into the 20s and 30s and wondering, are we getting into the show? And, you know, that journey is what is accessible to the non-fan. You don't need to know the songs.
Yeah.
You know, you can just plug into that. And again, you said you didn't want to make a sad film. Thank you. Because given what a lot of us feel about this, had it been sad and reinforced some sort of, you know, dark story, while that might have been really captivating filmmaking, like it would hurt to watch. So this didn't feel that way.
Thank you. Yeah, definitely the intention was not to pick at any scabs or, exploit any.
Well, on the whole, it does. You have to understand that the film itself is picking the motherfucking scab, dog.
I mean, it's kind of like being a surgeon and being like, look, we're going to put anesthesia on this, okay? We're going to do everything we can to make you comfortable, as we do what we feel is, we think it's important.
I would like to hear a little bit about your field work, the people of that region, in the area of Coventry. The young man who's like maybe in his 30s now, but he was a kid watching from his parents' porch, just marveling at the wooks in the woods. And then you had that like real, like funny kind of sage older guy in his like barn, just remembering when. And then you had the general store cat. Like, so how do you find these random folks that are essential to understanding the big picture?
So it started kind of with our Instagram account years ago. I mean, that was how we initially, like, I was finding people through that. I was trying to figure out, how do I find people? And I knew, fans are on the web and everything. So that was one avenue. But that was kind of around the time, like, I mean, Aaron was one of the first key interviews, and I just blindly reached out to him because I read about how, he was a fan and he had gone, and it just like, he just seemed real cool. And I just reached out to his publicist, just like on a lark, just, hat in hand, just like, hey, I'm trying to make this thing. I know he's a fan. Can we, love to talk to him if possible. And he just was so awesome, man. He just wrote me back and he's like, yeah, totally up for it.
And you went and like scouted a location or something, right?
Yeah, he was just like, he's like totally up for it. So I'm like, that's it. I'm flying to Colorado on the next plane and let's do this. And so I got in the day before I was going to interview him. I think it was like on some weekend. And so, yeah, the day before, I'm like, I got to find like a cool location. Cause like, I don't want to just interview him in a house or I mean, he's this epic adventurer. Like, he has to have like a fitting background. So I found this cool spot.
That's the filmmaker in you.
Oh, thanks. But well, yeah, I just wanted to present well. And so I found this location. Didn't even know. I had to kind of guess what the lighting was going to look like the next day. But it was beautiful. It's like up on this, kind of mountaintop, and you can kind of see some of the rock and the mountains and stuff. So so that was just great. Just felt very appropriate. So and then I didn't expect to hear what he was going to say. Like I did not know certain facts, and I don't know if I should spoiler alert certain things, or I could just I
just want to co-sign that and say this, how he took us in the hole and in the incident and like what he was listening to. And that is in itself fucking potent. It has nothing to do with Coventry, but that is serious. That is like an amazing get as a journalist, like tip of the cap.
Oh man, it was just amazing. I mean, so yeah, just to know the details, like you're not going to get this from, maybe it's in his book, but you're not going to get this from watching 127 hours, and it was just so cool to hear these things from him. And then his Coventry story was epic. And so yeah, it was just, he was just such a great interview. So after that, it was like, I mean, I've been fighting to get it made for years, and I had kind of this renewed energy, but it's like sometimes when you're making stuff, I was writing stuff, and sometimes you don't know what's going to stick, and you're always looking for traction. But it was like, I was committed, but after that interview, it was like, okay, this is the point of no return. Like now I feel a responsibility to like finish this thing. Like it was from that interview on where I'm like, I have to do this, or just have to do it. So yeah, from there, Instagram really fired that up. I found one of my first collaborators. I met one of my producing partners, Larry Shapiro, early on. And then kind of shortly thereafter, around there, like on Instagram, I found this person reached out to me. Her name's Katie, and she's like looking for something to work on. She like, I was looking for people to interview, but she's like, no, I want to work on the movie. And she actually is also in the entertainment industry. She is an editor for reality TV, like a lot of Gordon Ramsay shows and stuff. And her and her husband were like, they're trying to have a kid for a long time, and wasn't happening right away. And so she was like looking for her hobby. She was looking for something like a passion project. And so I was like, yeah, I'll totally take help. And so she came on board and her husband came on board. He's the guy that did the artwork, the license plate graphic. And he's an artist. He does like art walk in LA like every year. And so met her. She happened to know my co-producing partner, Larry, by total sheer coincidence. They'd worked on a project together. And then she got me through a friend to Dave Werlin, who from Great Northeast Productions, who is of course the promoter of Coventry. And that was another kind of like,
not only that, he's like the festival godfather, everything all the way up until Coventry. So that's a major get right there.
Oh man, anybody who has been to those early pre-Coventry shows has all that has a debt of gratitude to Dave and his team and Adam Lewis and those guys and it was just they broke the back. I mean, they're kind of humble about it. They'll talk about it when you get them talking, but they broke the back of like not only the Phish festivals, but like all these other festivals that came along after. There wasn't a lot of like, music festivals out there by that time. So like, that in and of itself, the music industry at large, this is where it starts to get interesting for other people that may not be Phish fans of like, why is this a big deal? Well, have you been to any modern festivals? Like it kind of comes from here a lot. So, anyway, so yeah, and of course, as you can imagine, it was not, they had a great run. They did, Clifford Ball was like their first major festival, and they did, the Great Went, which I went to Great Went. I wasn't at Clifford Ball. They did Lemon Wheel. I went to Lemon Wheel. They did It.
Oswego.
Yeah, they did Oswego. I wasn't at Oswego. They did It. I was at It. Big Cypress.
And they partnered in Big Cypress. They were involved in Big Cypress, even though it was out of region.
They totally did Big Cypress as well. It was all them. And that was the one that's like, I don't have a lot of regrets in life, but I missed that one. I wasn't at Big Cypress. And I was back in college. I was like too cheap to fly home, and I had a girlfriend, and it was just it's a low key evening, and it's okay, no problem. So but it was
also interesting because that weirdly prepared me for the traffic jam. Was the Cypress traffic jam also like out of control and like a state emergency, all that stuff. But yeah, I wanted to just talk about Dave Werlin for a second. Obviously, you mentioned his sizable influence in the industry, and you're right. They did all those festivals up through Cypress, and then Phish, took the quote hiatus, and that's when the Bonnaroos began. And Phish came back for a little bit. They did Coventry, but then Festival Nation exploded during the quote retirement, and you can certainly thank Dave and his team. Shout out to my guy Michael Allegretto. He was involved in that too. But I wanted to ask you, like you said, Dave, not an easy guy to get to. Also in the beginning, maybe kept you at arm's length, but then eventually became like an ally and a real cheerleader for the project. So talk about that.
Yeah, well, in his case, I don't think I hadn't like reached out to him directly yet. It was like, so it wasn't like I was like courting him, but obviously it was like one of the next people I would love to talk to. And I at that point, I think I was focused on fan stories. And then it was like, yeah, whoever else we can get there would be great. But I felt like I was going to build up from fan stories, and then maybe I could get to some of these other people at a higher level. But so Katie had like mentioned to me that she had this connection to him. And so, of course, that personal connection is like, I'm sure it's like the only reason that he wanted to talk. Because at first he was very gracious, but clearly, he didn't have a great experience. Of course, he felt so bad. He felt like he let all these people down. I think he got like hundreds of letters of hate mail, and that's after bringing so much joy and pulling off so many things, and like I'm sure working your tail off without sleep and all these other things, to have that happen, you know, and then be blamed for it, that's not cool. That's again, why would he want to revisit that? So it was like I had to kind of convince him, like, hey, like this is going to be like from a positive thing. We're not blaming people. Like, look, we all know, look, things happen. Like, there doesn't have to be a bad guy in a movie. It can just be the weather. You know, it's okay. You know, and so after, you know, he lived in Massachusetts, so my family's from there. So on one of my trips back, I went and interviewed him at his home, and it was like after the cameras stopped rolling, like it was like kind of clouds. Not there were clouds, but it was like yes, it was like he knew that we were not there to do anything other than, you know, this was a labor of love and just trying to put everything in the most constructive light as possible. So, and yeah, from that point on, you know, it was kind of the beginning of a friendship and big support system from him, you know, all the way to this day. And, I mean, we were trying to, you know, a lot of, as you can imagine, a lot of twists and turns, you know, we don't know where the movie's going to go. When's it going to get done? What footage are we going to collect? How long's it, you know, going to be? And you know as the 20th was approaching, I mean, he was like one of the first people to be like, oh, you got to put something out for the 20th. I'm like, yes, for sure. Like we've tried to, you know, we're do a lot of things up until this point. But for sure, like wasn't going to miss it. So, and he was just so happy that that it came out, and thankfully he's you know, like the end product, and then again, and Adam Lewis, you know, again, he's been super helpful. He helped with that, you know, getting the word out and our press release and everything. So yeah, just super indebted.
How did you find the townies?
Yeah, so the locals, so Larry, my producer partner Larry and I, we put out a press release that we were looking for locals to interview. And we went to the local papers, it was like the Caledonian Record put out a story, some other local, you know, outlets, and we were able to, and we just started, you know, it was the same email that we've had all along, and jamthedoc@gmail.com, and we had people just reaching out. A lot of people wanted to talk to us, and then we actually got a lot of responses, and Katie was helping me field a lot of those, and so she was like super helpful and went with me. We did 2 trips to Vermont to get these interviews. So she went on one, and then I had another friend go with me on another one. You know, he did drone footage and Vermont, captured all that. So so yeah, fortunately that was like that wasn't that difficult. It was great. We just, you know, they were very welcoming, got it out there. People saw it, they responded. It was really a big deal. I mean, this is a town of like less than 1,000 people, at least at the time. Might be a little bigger now, but it's about as small town as it gets. And this was and very remote. I mean, that was the point. That's what Phish loved doing, these festivals there, and that's what we loved about it, that adventure. And so, like, the biggest thing that happened in the region. So again, most people back there had a positive experience of it, and only a few maybe it inconvenienced them. But yeah, so we were lucky to get those people. They all kind of reached out to us based on our press release.
Word. Yeah. I really thought that those contributions and perspectives were like very impactful, because, you know, Phish fans, you know, we can talk about Phish really good, but like oftentimes just really hyper focused on us and our thing. And so to have these, like, you know, townies, normies, regular folk, whatever you want to call them, from the area, just sort of like give you a macro lens. I thought that the economics little sidebar was very effective and important, being that the people of the area were extremely worried about their, you know, crops and their farm because of this unseasonable rain, and they had this foreboding feeling of, you know, a big fall harvest season of underwhelming, and unfortunately. So then they were doubling down. Hey, we have this giant rock concert coming to town, so we're going to hopefully even the scales by all the commerce and people coming to town and buying up everything in the stores, which they did do. I mean, I thought that was also really cool how you had the store telling you all the stuff they run out of, how fast, and that was because people just parked on the road. So I really thought all that was super effective, especially like sort of like the economic seesaw that was at stake here. And it was like one of those intangible things that a Phish fan wouldn't have brought up. But by you having those locals, another really effective thing was taking us in the sort of like de facto press room where they had to like the war room with the map and the cops in their statey uniforms. And like, we've always heard the announcement. We've heard Mike's voice. I was holding my breath. Did you have footage of Mike making the announcement? I've never seen him actually say the words, but I've heard his voice say the words more times than I can count. But just putting us in that room as the discussions were happening. So how'd you get that?
The audio from the radio broadcast happened to be something that, again, I got fortunate. Like, I have my camera rolling when that stuff was happening. So like when the real announcement happened, I basically grabbed my camera pretty early on. I think you can see where the footage kind of starts. It's like kind of rising up. But before that, you hear some audio. They had rebroadcast it again later. So when they rebroadcast it, I kind of got the beginning part that I had missed. And then so I just put some other like video over that. But I basically recorded with the video camera, out of the car speakers, the whole thing. So that's from car speakers into the, digital video camera. That's where that audio came from. It was, found footage audio basically of the traveler's perspective of it happening. So yeah, there was a number of people that was the other thing. So like when we reached out to fans and when we reached out to the locals, I mean, it was not just looking for interviews, but we were like, welcoming, like, of course, if anybody has any great, footage. And so we got video and we got home video. We got professional, still photography from some local photographers that were very gracious about, letting us have their footage as well. Footage from Dave Werlin. He had like a whole kit of photographs. One of our other interviewees, her husband was also in the police, and she had in the Orleans Police Department. They had some access to some great photos as well. So it came from all over. It came from kind of every direction, which is cool too, because again, it helps us kind of paint that kind of holistic perspective of the whole thing from these different sides. And then, yeah, physically, from the ground and up in the air.
Yeah, it's amazing. I was going to say you had an overhead, maybe like a helicopter or airplane shot at one point.
My friend Larry was actually, he shot, it's very muddy. It's like that really grainy digital video, like right before the show. But yeah, he was up in that chopper. Him and his cohorts were filming that. So actually some of that also came from Larry. Larry was actually, that was one of the reasons we partnered up, was because he was hired to do press footage at the show. So, and he actually has a little cameo in it, like when the narration's like, and the show actually went off and you see this dude in a blue shirt and he's walking back and he kind of looks back at the camera. That's Larry. So if you're looking for Larry.
Speaking of, so I recognize numerous people, Ellis Goddard from Phish.net. My very first thing I ever wrote on the internet about music was a Phish review on .net before they were even like putting them on the front page, just in like the message board. But somebody from Jambase read that and the rest is history. But so I am very fond of .net and Ellis's work and legacy over the years. And even now, like some of the most dynamic Phish analysis can still be found on .net. But also Annabelle from Jam Cruise I recognized. And of course, I have to bring up, it's only a still photograph, but let me see if I can pull it up real quick here. Because you have my friend Brandon Sachs, who I grew up with in
Really?
New Jersey, like same neighborhood, same high school, all that. Yep. I saw this. I had to pause it. All right. I'm going to hold it up for you. It's at, for those listening, for the hometown Cherry Hill homies, Brandon Sachs, still shot for like 5 seconds. And to set the when you are describing the joy of fans, we made it in, the music is starting, and this, you definitely like sort of brightened the picture in a way, because the people turned away are away and the people are in, and now it's time to hear the music. It's 25 minutes into a 27-minute film. I guess the cut you put out was about 27 minutes before the credits. Okay, so 25:17. This is one of my oldest friends.
Oh wow, the guy who's facing the camera with his mouth open. guy and the dude hugging the guy, that's your friend. That's awesome. Oh man.
Yeah, dude. I was like, wow, really? And then I sent it to the hometown homies. I sent it to him. It's funny. He hit me. He's like, dude, I just landed in Grand Rapids. What's up? And I randomly saw him like 3 months ago in New Orleans Jazz Fest for the first time in like a decade. And then I saw this in the film. But yeah, that's one of our homies from our hometown. Like my dad, my late father, and his late father used to walk around the track at our high school and run and jog like together when we were little kids before we were even friends.
That's amazing. Wow. Well, I got to credit that photograph came from a guy named Gordon Alexander, who was he was like a pro photographer from up in the region, I think. And he so anyway, off of your thing, so he deserves the credit for that photo. Yeah, I love that photo. That was like we posted that on our Instagram like early as like one of the things, you know, trying to get people excited to talk to us like a long time ago. It lives up there. I just love it. It's such an amazing caught moment. It's like that's the joy. That's the connection with your friends. It's the last time. Yeah, man. I mean, the whole thing. It reminds me of. I wanted to say earlier. I think we were talking about that sort of the universal appeal. Like what's that underlying human condition thing about it? And it's like one of my favorite movies is Detroit Rock City. I don't know if you've ever seen that.
Yep.
They're trying to get into a Kiss concert. And it's like same deal. It's like, you know, it reminds me of that. It's like, hey, we're their friends, you know what that's like. And then they're like kind of combined with that nostalgia of like Dazed and Confused. It's like, all right, it's the last day of school. It's like our lives are gonna change. We're all hang out together. It's like it's all in that guy's face. It's all in your friend's face. I love it.
Because you mentioned in your press release, and again, if anyone's curious about a lot of the minutia of this journey, what different collaborators he met and the experiences and the no's that you got. I kind of wanted to ask about all that stuff, but we'd be here all night, and you basically spell it out in that. But so I got two questions. One is so you're a film student, and then you go to Coventry, and then you're in film. You're in that sector. So you're uniquely positioned for this project. It's not like you just made a bunch of recordings and now you're like, shit, I got to make a documentary. Like you're in that world. So do you think that, like you said, you met with investors and certain, you know, possible distributors, and you met with some like A-list people who passed, but the fact that they even took a meeting was like very gratifying. And at the same time, like you said, got very frustrated, and there were times the wheels almost fell off of the project, and then there would get a fresh jolt of energy, a Dave Borland, a Katie, or whatever, that sort of yo-yo of the experience. Do you think that you being in that sector was an advantage, or do you think that it maybe caused it to take 20 years because you came at it like you want to in the professional world versus like some just DIY documentary that someone's going to do that themselves and put on YouTube? You went like in the professional route with it, and I'm curious if you think that was advantageous, or because of everything you described, all the false starts and leaving you at the altar and all that shit that made you almost give up.
That's a great question. And I'd say it's both. I mean, you know, it was, yeah, definitely. I mean, I wanted to make something that was of quality. So yeah, I didn't want to rush it out there or do it the wrong way or just be like, oh, this will be fine, you know. So for sure, yeah, we wanted to get it done at the highest levels, and we started humbly, and it took a while. So yeah, hopefully, I mean, yeah, wanted to make something that was palatable, but yeah, I mean, at a certain point, first of all, a lot of that started happening by the time like COVID hit. That was kind of like the point where we had like enough. We felt like we could try to go and get it to that level. So I wasn't in any physical rooms with anybody actually, because we live like this now. But what we did do is, yeah, like, I mean, there's been people along the way, like there's people we were trying to get to, like Danny DeVito. Okay. Danny DeVito was at the show, and there's a whole section that's been cut out. I might release it as like a bonus footage, or maybe we'll do something later, but it's great. It's so funny. All these people that we interviewed, like, had these Danny DeVito run-ins, and I mean, that's just cool. It's cool that he's there. He's a cool guy. I think he's there because his sons are big Phish fans. So, you know, kind of trying to get to him, but you know, a lot of times when you're reaching out, you may or may not hear back from somebody, but like you got some kind of inroad in. It's like, yeah, maybe call, and then you just don't hear. So that's normal. You don't take offense to it, but so there's a lot of that. But we did partner. Like, so Larry, my producing partner got me to this other guy, Aaron Semmel, who's our other producer on the project. And that was funny too, because like all this weird like connections that have been happening all the way through this project. Like it turned out after like 45 minutes into our phone conversation, Aaron and I realized that we had known each other really well, because back in the day when Coventry happened, like circa that era, we were both assistants in Hollywood and our bosses were friends. And in fact, his boss was my boss for like a minute before he was his boss. So we talked on the phone all the time. So it's like, oh man. So anyway, Aaron was like, he's working very hard to get us directly in with other people. And there were a company called Shark Teeth Films. And then we partnered with these other guys, this Emmy award-winning, they do Emmy award-winning music docs, the Texas Crew Productions, and Chip Reeves there, super supportive. And I mean, they were helping us collectively going to, get passes from, some A-list celebrity talents. I don't want to put anybody on the spot because they passed. So, but they were really cool names, cool people who I admire and think are great and would have been awesome. One of them was like a genuine, Phish fan. And then there's another one who is, kind of playing someone in that world, kind of. And so,
I'm picking up what you're putting
yeah,
down.
man. So it was great to be up at bat. It was very exciting. And that was just a couple of years ago. Well, it wasn't even that long ago. There's people now that are interested. We're trying to, of course we were always trying to get to the band too, but I've never had any expectations that we would, because again, I kind of put them in the camp of like Dave and these other people that have had a bad experience. It's like, and also they have always been highly protective of their work, and that's cool. They kind of live in their own world. So again, but that was also another problem. I think a lot of people were like afraid to touch the project if Phish wasn't involved. And so kind of by the end, that is what I was like, okay, fine, fuck this. I'm like, I'm not gonna wait around and wait for permission anymore. And I mean, kind of during that process, I had always had momentum. So I had been working on a longer cut just to keep myself busy while we're waiting. Because it's just like you send a submission out and you wait a bunch of months and then you do another one. And it's just, that's all the activity there is. So yeah, in all that time, made that long cut. It went over, pretty well, but it wasn't finished. I didn't have, it's a big deal. I'm kind of like doing it all. Like movies are supposed to be made by a bunch of people, and kind of came down to me finally cutting it. I had to learn how to edit. I had to learn how to do all these things over all the years. So I was in a position where I felt like the right thing to do was to make a really potent 30-minute cut. Cause the truth is we still believe, this should, like you said, there's a lot more to talk about. There's a lot of scenes that we already have that are great. And there's a lot of stuff that in a lot of other perspectives, I know we could record and capture and do this thing even kind of bigger. So in our minds, this is actually still kind of a launch pad, maybe for something bigger, or maybe it's where the train gets off. But, at the very least, it was kind of like, this ended up kind of being like, well, let's do a long commercial for like what our like kind of their big dream is. Let's do something that's not going to overstay its welcome. Maybe people will be like, hey, hopefully it wasn't so rushed that it wasn't satisfying. Like it's a whole thing, but hopefully it leaves you wanting more. I mean, any good movie you should. So like I said, whether or not that's the case, we'll see. But the main thing is like, oh man, getting this out there after 20 years is like, that's the biggest reward. The biggest reward in the world is getting out there and then hearing that people enjoyed it and that they were, uplifted by it, and all that. It's great. It feels like it kind of fell into a nice place, maybe where it needed to be, kind of at the last minute almost.
The whole 20 years later motif, very effective to roll it out like that. I mean, look at me. I went into scramble mode, prepared an interview, probably going to try to maybe even distill something in print out of this. So it's impactful in that regard. I've watched a lot of like YouTube stuff, amateur films that I've enjoyed, but I didn't necessarily send an immediate email requesting an interview. And also, I have mixed emotions about the shortcut. I almost wish you didn't tell us that.
Okay.
Because I know that there was like a possible longer cut, so like in watching, I'm like, wow, I think the credits start coming up in the 27th or 8th minute. And I remember thinking, wow, it's a 30-minute cut. I'm left wanting. So I guess that is effective. And at the same time, like if you have gold on the cutting room floor, make that available for people who are interested in it, I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just saying I think there is a market
Yeah,
for
and we
that.
will one way or another. And I mean, we could still release what we have.
Hopefully not 20
No,
more
no,
years.
no.
Maybe the 25th anniversary. 25th anniversary.
Even like throughout maybe like, the rest of the year. I mean, we're now starting to do like we just applied to our first film festival last week.
Oh, that's great. Congrats.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, we hope we get in. It's the one that I've had my eye on kind of for a while. So I'll just spoil it. If we don't get in, it'll be Assessor, but that's okay. But South by Southwest is like just feels like the one of the top, just because it's like that's what they're about. They started, it's very music based.
Yeah.
It just sort of feels like that's a great place. So and then so we'll see. Maybe they'll like it. But it's nice to actually finally be able to be in the position to actually submit to these places. So we're gonna keep doing that. So we're gonna keep rolling it. It'll keep kind of rolling along, and then again, yeah, we could keep putting out some of this stuff that hit the cutting room floor, I think, and still be in a position where it's like there's still so much more that never even got into any cut, and there's still so much that we could still go out and shoot. I mean, there's like people that I wanted to talk to, those people that were like at the line and turned around, right? Or like, they were right there. They were right over the line or right, behind the line. And we have people like that we just didn't get on camera that have come out. And there's just so many stories that were emailed to me that would be like, wow, that's amazing. So I think there's definitely, either way, I think it'll be satisfying, now that there's something there's a base. One of the interviews we had was this, there's a guy who he had to borrow a Phish fan's vehicle to get to the hospital because his wife was going into labor and he couldn't get through the traffic. And I interviewed him and the kid back when the kid was like 11 years old. Now the kid's like 20. So it's like, that's the kind of thing where it's like, I'd like to unearth that footage. And then like now, interview him again, like closer to if something big, something bigger is coming out where it's like, okay, it's going to come out when he's about that same age. So, but yeah, it's like they called him the Phish baby and then he met up with them and returned their vehicle. They just the trust and the helping. So there's a lot of like, why make something? Because there's a ton of cool, positive stories that actually came at us, and these friendships and people that still write to the townspeople that they made a connection with all these years later and send Christmas cards. Like that stuff all happened and is still happening to this day. So those are the kinds of things want to tell more of those stories.
As well, we should, because there are a lot of like unfortunate tropes against Phish community and just like Festival Nation, our way of life. Yeah, some of them true, but the human stories and the sort of characters, these every little, you picked great, like whatever vignettes, whatever you want to call the passages with the individuals. The fans were cool, but the locals, man, that shit is mad potent. Like hearing the stories of folks that lived it on the other side and how they chose to step up. I really love that guy talking about carting people in his truck and like this real old geezer farmer dude. Just that stuff is, they say very little, so much in so few words. Just there's like a ancient history in their delivery, and so I really thought those conversations, like if you had longer cuts of those, I would like to hear them expound further.
Yeah, definitely do. That guy, yeah, Don Podry Sr. He was like the heart. I think he's like the heart of the movie because he's just like, he's that Vermonter, salt of the earth, so genuine, such a good guy. And yeah, he ended up actually passing away sadly several years back.
Glad you got that footage while you could.
Yeah, actually, his family had reached out and they were like, several years ago, they were wondering when the movie was coming out, and I said, I don't know yet, and they said that he had passed, and so I was like, okay, the movie now has meaning because I just gave them all the footage. I'm like, here, this is your loved one. So it was like about an hour's worth of interview, and like I don't even have this of my own parents.
What a gift,
I should.
though. What a
I was
gift.
actually thinking, yeah. So I felt like, because when you're in the middle of like, you put so much work in, but you don't know where it's going, and I mean that was one of those moments where I'm like, I don't know what's going on with this right now. So from that day on, I felt like, okay, all the effort was meaningful because there's some family out there that like has this kind of priceless glimpse back at their loved one, and they can share that with their loved ones. And I'm like, that's it. Okay, well, nothing happens from now on, then it's been worth it on some level.
That's a beautiful reciprocal. That is a beautiful reciprocal benevolent thing to give them just all the footage like that. I just think of my late dad, and I can still hear his voice in my mind. But if I could, like, and I put on some old family videotapes, whatever. But if I could, have an hour of him just sitting telling stories, are you fucking kidding me? That is a treasure.
Yeah. I mean, why would I hold
But I mean,
that
to
back
be
from
able
them?
to give that to them, like just fuck yeah, dude. Thank you for
Yeah.
sharing that. Really moved me actually to hear that. So
Yeah.
thank you. And I think that's a good spot to
man.
disembark. Jam the documentary, right? On
All right.
Instagram.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, it's on. You can watch it on Vimeo OTT. And the link is in our Instagram.
You're right. I'll drop the link in the show notes, and I'll put your Instagram in the show notes. But like home base for all things Jam the Doc is the IG page, I take it.
Yep, that's kind of our flagship. We're extending out, we're on Reddit a little bit. We technically have a Facebook page and there's a Twitter, but there's that's the hub. That's when all the magics happen there. So I'm very feel the warm and fuzzies for Instagram. So
that seems like that was the way that you sort of seeded the project and got all these amazing contributions back from there. But I always, at the end of my podcast, I kind of just tell the listeners where just one place they can go for all the things. But in the show notes will be the link to rent. I bought it. I'm going to buy it for some friends. I mean, it's $2. Come on. I expect all y'all, if you made it this far in the podcast, go buy the film for yourself and buy one for a friend. Because this dude put 2 decades of his life into it. Alex, it's been an absolute joy. That's a quote we like to say. That was like Trey at the first Bonnaroo when he was really high, just trying to communicate to everybody how happy he was. He said, it's an absolute joy. So that's kind of how I feel right now. Less high, but just as joyful, because this was an amazing walk down memory lane. Some of my Phish friends will chuckle that I chose Absolute Joy. But nonetheless, Alex, dude, I'm very impressed with the film and the journey that you got there. Seriously, really just a fascinating story of how you brought this to fruition, and we're grateful and say thank you.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it so much. Thank you so much for letting me get it off my chest. As you can imagine, it's kind of like the interview of 20 years later. It's kind of cathartic. It's just cathartic. It's cathartic to be able to share all this. So no, I thank you so much for this opportunity, man.
Cocksucking bitches is what they are.
$5.
Why do you release 60,000 more tickets if there's no place to put people? So you let the people that buy the tickets yesterday when you re-release them and get them in there on Thursday or whatever motherfucking day, you can't make them in because I done the whole fucking tour and I got here and you told me not to come till Saturday morning? What the fuck? What the fuck? Trey says, don't come till Saturday morning in Camden. Don't come till Saturday morning because you won't be able to get in. Yeah, you're damn straight. You can't get in. You can fucking cancel it all, man. You're still gonna play for those people that bought tickets fucking 2 days ago. Motherfucking cocksuckers. They've always been cocksuckers. That's why they haven't played a good show for their fucking years. Because they're cocksuckers. Fuck them. Fuck them. I don't know. I'm still getting in. I'm still going. Real time, walking down that shit. We're all going in.
That was entertaining.